The year is 16 BBY. The Clone Wars are over. The Jedi are gone. The Senate has been dissolved. The Death Star is about halfway built. The rebels haven't really started rebelling yet, and Emperor Palpatine is bored out of his withered mind. He's got nothing to do except to sit in his throne room and rewatch old Senate recordings like a divorced dad watching home videos of arguments he won. Then, a delivery. A crate arrives from the ruins of the Jedi Temple. A collection of holocrons, scrolls, and whatever weird Force garbage Jocasta Nu died trying to protect. Most of it's pretty standard. Sith poetry, holovids of Darth Revan doing philosophy in a cave, a diagram of how to choke someone using only your taxes. But buried beneath it all is the vault of marginal power. A black, ancient holocron pulsing with sinister energy and embossed with a single symbol, a credit impaled on a lightsaber. Palpatine opens it and freezes. Inside are the forbidden teachings of the Austrian Sith, a long-lost school of economic darksiders who believed the Force wasn't just about power, it was about markets. The first voice speaks. It's dusty, smug, and extremely unhelpful. All trade stems from perceived marginal utility. Even pain, when allocated efficiently, becomes profit. Palpatine's eyes narrow at the words. Menga. He remembers his first year at the Mason Center for Intergalactic Exchange Studies, before the Sith, before the Senate, when a young Sheev Palpatine wore elbow patches and quoted Wieg von Mises to girls who immediately walked away. He listens. All of it comes flooding back. Sentient Motion by Lord von Mises. The midichlorian Theory of Capital by Jorgenbaden Bothbark. And his personal favorite, Smugglers and Syndicates, by Israel Kijnar, which he once annotated in blood during finals. Palpatine cancels all appointments. He kicks Masameda out of the room mid-sentence. He pulls up a velvet chair and starts binge listening like it's a true crime podcast. For the first time in years, the Dark Lord of the Sith has a new obsession: Austrian economics. And then, he says the words that doom the galaxy. From now on, let the invisible hand do it. No one really knows what that means. Tarkin assumes it's a secret assassin. Masameda nods like he understands, then immediately files for retirement. Vader writes it in a notebook and begins quietly building something. Palpatine doesn't explain, he just smiles, because the Force, the Empire, the galaxy, it's all about to be efficient. So, the Emperor has discovered Austrian economics. And like any good cultist with too much power and zero oversight, he doesn't ease it in, he mandates it. Galactic Decree 42069. All Imperial governance shall now reflect the principles of natural economic order, decentralized capital formation, and spontaneous force equilibrium. Nobody really understands what this means, but it sounds smart and vaguely Sithy, so the Empire just pretends it knows what it's doing. The first casualties? The ministries. Gone. The Ministry of Agriculture? That's too interventionist. Ministry of Health? Too probiotic. The Ministry of Transportation replaced with a Wookiee with a sign that says, "Figure it out yourself." Every regional governor now has to bid for their job through decentralized auctions. One wins Coruscant by offering a 6-pack of thermal detonators and a rare Jar Jar NFT. The bidding war for Naboo ends in a duel and a lawsuit. Palpatine watches this unfold and just nods. The market chooses. Stormtroopers? No more salaries. They're now contractors. Paid per confirmed blast. That's not a joke. One stormtrooper shoots 6 rebels and bills the Empire for independent laser transactions. Another reports no kills and still submits an invoice labeled performance-based suppression bonus. Payroll collapses in just 3 weeks. Meanwhile, the Death Star? That's put on indefinite hold. Palpatine insists that the private sector must express demand for planetary annihilation. A Hutt crime family offers to fund it in exchange for naming rights. They rename it the Galaxy Liberation Orb, TM, a joint venture with Glub Shido Holdings. Tagline, you miss a payment? Yeah, we miss Alderaan. Nobody really knows what they do. Their CEO's always on vacation. It gets worse. Moff Tarkin, confused but loyal, begins quoting Friedrich von Vizar at command briefings. He starts wearing circular glasses and insists all fleet movements must now reflect the natural force of exchange. Admirals cry. Entire star systems are lost because Tarkin wants to see how markets self-correct orbital blockades. There's a Senate hearing, but Palpatine doesn't attend. Instead, he broadcasts himself from a gold hover throne, reading from Lord Wieg von Mises' banned treatise, Sentient Motion, while sipping mineral water and calling democracy a misallocation of governance signals. Bureaucrats start defecting, some to the rebellion, others to a new faction forming around Palpatine's teachings, the Austro-Scythian Restoration League. And Vader, he's still quiet and plotting on Mustafar. Everyone else? They're busy trying to figure out what's happened to reality. There's now 3 competing galactic currencies. Credits, Force Coin, and something called Midabucks, which are backed by midichlorians? Palpatine says this is creative destruction. His economists call it price discovery. His enemies call it collapse. His fanbase? They call it liberty. So by now, the Empire is completely unrecognizable. Not because of rebellion, not because of sabotage, but because of markets. Unregulated, force-fueled, midichlorian-backed markets. The basic premise is this. If someone wants it bad enough, they'll build it. If they don't, it shouldn't exist. Which sounds cool until you try to schedule surgery, order a Bacta tank, or when you try to call the cops and you instead get routed to a podcast about barter economics. Bounty hunters stop working for credits. Now they take payment in impact futures, a derivative based on how scared their targets look. Medical droids form an open marketplace where procedures are bid on by spectators. One Twi'lek bleeds out because his gallbladder removal lost to a guy with better lighting and a compelling backstory. This is what Hayek meant, Palpatine mutters, thumbing through the hyperspace lane to Sithdom. Let the lanes price themselves. Shipping collapses within a week. The Trade Federation rebrands as a non-profit called Market Beings United, whose entire purpose is letting planets sink or swim based on their natural liquidity alignment. Tatooine becomes a pilot zone for unregulated currency trials. They invent a sand-based barter token called Grain Chain that gets stolen immediately by Jawas and resold to libertarian podcasters on Ord Mantell. Obi-Wan flees, dragging the Skywalker family with him to Dagobah, only to discover Yoda is building a low-regulation startup retreat to fund his soup addiction. Obi-Wan screams. Meanwhile, Palpatine's press conferences get weird. He no longer issues threats. He quotes Marrak Rothbard instead. Empire is not a structure. It is a perceived value proposition derived from suppressed alternatives. Masameda nods like he understands. He does not. On Coruscant, banks collapse. On Bespin, all workers are laid off and replaced with market monks who meditate on Tibanna gas futures. But no one suffers more than the smugglers, because now they're legal. Palpatine declares if a Hutt can do it cheaper, they deserve the market share. Enter Israel Kiznar's Smugglers and Syndicates, a holocron manifesto that becomes the new Bible of the Outer Rim. Spice runners start quoting it like scripture. Black Sun opens a business school. The Pikes file for accreditation as decentralized logistics specialists. Crime syndicates don't get arrested anymore, they get licensed. Boba Fett starts wearing a pin that says, "Ask me about my marginal gains." And through all this, Palpatine is smiling. He hosts weekly salons. He reads from Johann von Bothburg and full ceremonial robes, starts referring to economic crashes as voluntary recalibrations. Vader sends increasingly panicked messages from Mustafar. "Master, the hand is almost ready. What are we doing?" He gets no reply, because Palpatine is too busy filming a holo documentary titled Being, Empire, and the Trade Federation. The Rothbard cycle. Nobody watches it. But the galaxy? The galaxy watches everything burn, and wonders who, if anyone, is still flying this ship. So the Empire is in free fall. Not from rebellion, not from sabotage, but from a libertarian math applied to interstellar logistics. Planetary police forces are now voluntary peace associations, with zero enforcement power and monthly newsletters. Crime becomes pay to watch. Naboo gets bought by an influencer collective that sells Senate access via affiliate links. Tatooine runs a GoFundMe for moisture. The Outer Rim? Now a tax-free, force-neutral trade zone. Hoth gets sold to a startup claiming it can mine emotional warmth using vibrocrystals and positive affirmations. The Empire itself? Technically a DAO now. No one knows what it does. It has 12 billion credits in unusable tokens, a rotating council of podcasters, and a mascot called Decentro the Efficient. And Vader? Vader's lost. Because months ago, right when all this started, Palpatine looked him dead in the eye and said, "From now on, let the invisible hand do it." Vader, being Vader, took that literally. He went to Mustafar. Silently, purposefully, he began recovering every scrap of General Grievous's old flagship, the Invisible Hand. Hull fragments, burned superstructure, melting databanks, the Separatist paint job even. He rebuilt the entire thing piece by hand. He even refurbished the bridge using melted lightsabers and reclaimed astromech guts. The result? A gleaming monstrosity of confusion and faith, because he thought this was a secret Sith order. Every time a policy collapsed, every time a governor vanished, a currency died, or spice somehow became legal tender, Vader just stared into space and muttered, "Patience? The invisible hand will fix this." And now the ship is finally done. He flies it to Coruscant, triumphant, descending through the smog with full drama. He expected applause. He's expecting revelation. expecting there to be a next phase of the plan. Instead, all he finds are markets flooded with worthless crypto coins, governors who are bankrupt and holding bake sales, moisture futures collapsing so hard they go negative, and Palpatine arguing with a Java economist about whether minimum wages violate the teachings of Friedrich von Bizarre. Master, I have brought the invisible hand. What is this madness? Palpatine stares at him. 10 full seconds of smugness. Then, slowly. Oh, I meant laissez-faire. Vader's respirator skips. His hand twitches. He turns without a word. He boards the ship, and he quickly begins targeting every libertarian think tank in known space. One explodes mid-podcast. Another is atomized while debating the ethics of streetlights. A third gets shredded by proton torpedoes during a panel on voluntary Sith overlordship. No one stops him, because there's no central command anymore, no chain of command, no budget, no backup, just freedom. Violent, unregulated, explosion-prone freedom. At this point, the Empire's not an empire. It's a collection of vibes-backed micro-governments run by influencers, smugglers, and Sith-adjacent crypto theorists who all believe taxation is a form of forced suppression. The HoloNet is flooded with videos titled 10 Ways to Monetize Your Sector Without Central Authority. Is the Force just a market signal? Padme was right. Passive income through emotional manipulation. On the misty swamps of Dagobah, the remaining Jedi survivors gather to reform the Jedi Order, but quickly splinter into ideological factions over which economic system should guide their new beginning. The group fractures into 4 camps. Classical economics, led by Adam Smith, insists that the invisible hand of the market will restore galactic balance without any interference. Keynesian economics, championed by Janman Keynes, who insists that only aggressive spending and stimulus can restore balance. Monetarism, defended by Moff Milton Friedman, who demands strict control over the galactic credit supply to prevent inflationary collapse. And the Marxists, rallying under Comrade Karl Marx, who declares that the Jedi must dismantle the power structures of capital and seize the means of force production. Meanwhile, Yoda remains silent. The others assume his quietude reflects the wisdom of a Grand Master unwilling to sway the debate. In truth, Yoda is simply heartbroken. His dream of a peaceful, low-regulation startup retreat to fund his soup habits has collapsed into yet another endless council debate. In the shadows, Obi-Wan begins taking death sticks. Not to dull the pain of exile, but to cope with the return of spreadsheets, acronyms, and economic theory debates. Palpatine, meanwhile, gives weekly broadcasts from an obsidian patio, reading aloud from Murak Rothbar's Being, Empire, and the Trade Federation, occasionally pausing to sip glowing blue wine and say things like, "We are not collapsing, we are decentralizing." Midichlorians are now classified as speculative assets. The rebellion becomes the galaxy's most profitable startup after their modest Patreon, Fund the Fight, Buy the Flight, goes viral and is swiftly co-opted by space venture capitalists. Suddenly, every dogfight has its own ticker symbol. X-Wings are plastered with rival hedge fund logos, from Blackspire Capital to Corellia Quant. Dogfights start to resemble NASCAR races, with pilots wearing sponsor-laden suits and mid-battle shoutouts to brand partners. Realizing that credits lie not in freedom, but in frictionless monetization, the rebellion launches a gambling app on standard issue datapads.
Fans across the galaxy can now place live bets on space battles, complete with parlays on individual pilots. Who lives? Who scores a hit? Who dies in the first 30 seconds? Morale soars. Ethics plummet. Crime syndicates now openly publish their revenue reports. Huts go public. Black Sun, now once a feared crime syndicate, evolves into something far more insidious: a venture capital firm. Rebranded as Black Sun Strategic Ventures, they now abandon spice running and slave trading in favor of predatory development loans. Under the guise of economic revitalization, they lease entire planetary sectors to ambitious local leaders, only to load them with crushing debt, artificial infrastructure costs, and performance clauses no one can meet. They build luxury spaceports on agrarian moons, open orbital co-working spaces on planets without potable water, and install holonet cafes on worlds with 18-hour power outages. Locals are priced out of their own homes, their industries sold off to shell corporations, and when defaults inevitably occur, Black Sun seizes the land, the resources, and the debtors' future generations. Whole systems are left gutted, forests paved over, governments destabilized, and cultures erased under brand unification campaigns. To the galaxy, they call it innovation. To those left behind, it's strip-mined gentrification at light speed. Boba Fett starts his own coaching brand. Cad Bane becomes the spokesman for Kill Rate Analytics, a startup that turns bounty data into investment portfolios. But no one can stop it, because there is no it anymore. The Empire has fully transitioned into an idea, a belief system built on Friedrich Hayek's belief in the hyperspace lane to Sithdom. Wig von Mises' idea that motion is liberty, and Palpatine's one guiding principle: if something breaks, it's because the market wanted it to. And as worlds burn, trade dissolves, and faith in reality itself collapses, Palpatine calls it dynamic pricing. Vader, meanwhile, just keeps bombing libertarian think tanks. He no longer explains why. He just leaves behind a single calling card, a sticker of the invisible hand with the words, "You did this." And so we arrive at the end, not of a war, not of a rebellion, but of governance of itself, of cause and effect, of anything making sense. Because what began as a Sith Empire has become a quote-driven hallucination powered by misread holocrons, crypto huts, and an economic theory with a kill count. Rebellions try to push forward, but there's no empire left to fight. Just independent contractors, deregulated cults, and regions that now refer to themselves as emergent behavior clusters. The New Republic? It forms early, but collapses immediately. It's too centralized. Leia gets sued by a moisture-backed pack for coercive egalitarianism. She settles out of court with midichlorian vouchers. And Palpatine? He's still alive and in power, kind of. He exists as a hollow thought leader, broadcasting 6 times a day from a throne made of melted coins and broken economic models. He calls himself the Marginal Chancellor. He hosts a podcast called The Force of Incentives. His most downloaded episode, Why Jedi Monasteries Cause Inflation. His guests include Sith monks, failed influencers, and one Jawa who thinks tariffs are just a mind trick. Every episode ends with a quote from Barack Rothbard, followed by an ad for dietary supplements. The Invisible Hand appears briefly in orbit over Corellia, destroys a floating libertarian startup city called Libre Luna, then disappears into hyperspace without a word. Some say he's hunting the last economics departments. Some say he's waiting for Palpatine to say one more buzzword. Others say nothing, because he blew up their entire ideology mid-TED Talk. And the galaxy, it limps forward. Some systems reboot the old ways, some double down on chaos. Some worship a statue of Dark Plagueis in a tax-free temple where sermons cost $5.99 a month. Yoda, watching from the netherworld, says only one thing. Told you I did. Stupid it was. And that's where we leave it. A galaxy that tried to solve power with theory, that replaced command with memes, that gave a Sith Lord a book and watched him deregulate reality itself. Because this isn't just a story about collapse, it's a story about interpretation, about trust, and about what happens when somebody says, let the invisible hand do it, and nobody asks quite what that means. This has been Canon Chaos, where the dark side meets Austrian theory, and somehow Vader still comes out the only functioning adult in the room. Until then, may your incentives be aligned, your force unregulated, and your economy hopefully less dumb than this one.